Coming up from the Northeast Live Studios in Guwahati, Northeast Tonight with Wasbir Hussain.
Hello and welcome to Northeast Tonight, the show that decodes the region. I am Wasbir Hussain. Today is the 3rd of May 2025. On this day, 2 years ago, bitter ethnic clash between two communities in Manipur, the Meiteis and the Kukis, began, disrupting peace in the frontier state, killing more than 250 people on both sides and displacing an estimated 60,000 others who continue to live in makeshift relief camps even now. Today, various organizations representing both sides have held rallies and memorial programs remembering their loved ones who have lost their lives and tried to reinforce their own points of view. But ladies and gentlemen, this is not the time to resurrect the violence by talking about how people had to die and so on. After all, we have all seen and heard about that, something which will not fade so easily from our collective memory. For the sake of the younger generation in Manipur, whose education has been disrupted and who have been hit by emotional and psychological trauma, and to bring back or at least reduce the trust deficit between the two communities, the need of the hour for all right-thinking people in the beautiful state of Manipur is to talk about the road to peace. How can peace be brought back to Manipur? That's the big question. Some organizations have their demands, but demands can be addressed or discussed only by the government, and therefore solutions cannot be expected overnight. But the first thing that is required is peace, because peace is needed even to hold discussions. Already, the union government has held one round of formal talks with civil society organizations in New Delhi in the first week of April, but only representatives of 4 groups, 2 from the Meitei and 2 from the Kuki side, attended. Can this dialogue be broad-based with more representation in the future, or is there need for other steps to restore normality in Manipur? To discuss the issue, I am joined tonight by Mr. Dhiren Sadokpam. Mr. Dhiren Sadokpam is editor-in-chief of Frontier Manipur. I'm also joined by Mr. Jangholun Haukip, the Secretary of the Information and Publicity of the Kuki INPI. With me also is Dr. Noni Aranbam, Associate Professor of Political Science at DM University. I'm also joined by Dr. V.L. Naktang, Deputy Speaker of the Mar INPI. And I also have with me Dr. Shrima Ningombam, who is Assistant Professor of Nambol Sanoy College. I'm also supposed to be joined by Mr. Vumswan Naulak, who is the President of Jojomi Council. I'm expecting him to join the show later in the program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Northeast Tonight. Now, throughout the day today, in both the valley and the hills of Manipur, we saw people in large numbers attending different events. Basically, despite everybody talking their own points of view, one thing that struck me was that everybody was worried. They remembered their loved ones who died in this tragic violence, and they also expressed their concern about the displaced people who were living in very difficult conditions in makeshift relief camps. I'd like to begin my show with a fellow journalist of mine, Mr. Dhiren Sadokpam, Editor-in-Chief of Frontier Manipur. Dhiren, welcome to the show. What thoughts cross your mind? The Manipur has seen 2 years of violence today. We would have been happy if we would have celebrated today as some other landmark which is positive, but unfortunately we are observing 2 years of the violence. Now, don't you think that the need of the hour, apart from everything else, is peace and nothing else? Dhiren.
Wasbir, first of all, thank you for having me here. Wasbir, I think you had rightly introduced it. I think 2 years' time is a long time, okay? And if it is ridden with violence and misunderstanding and all kinds of tensions, I think no one can be at peace. But if you allow me to express certain views of mine, I would say May 3rd, 2023 should be remembered as a day of collective grief. When I say collective grief means it includes people from the both communities, okay?
Yes.
And it is better to be like as if there's a conflict between two communities, which is like Meiteis and Kuki-Jo communities. But for me, I think it is a day to be remembered as a day of collective grief. And why collective grief? Because this is the first way to acknowledge the anguish and pain suffered by all in Manipur, including those communities who were not directly involved in the violence and bloodshed.
Yes.
Please remember, when I say that there were people who are not directly, neither from the Meitei community nor from the Kuki-Zo community, but other communities who were also had to bear the brunt of this bloodshed that had been going on for almost 2 years now. And remembering the 3rd of May should also symbolize certain collective pride, okay, over loss of lives. We know that many people have died. We know more than over 60,000 people had been displaced. And there definitely, when such kind of a what you call when two communities are loggerhead, when they kill each other, when they fight each other, there is, a sense that we should instill upon ourselves is the need to recognize, the process of
Right.
reconciliation.
Right.
That reconciliation I think is very important.
Reconciliation.
And I think it is time to build bridges. When I say bridges means not simply agreeing to kind of a on the table, but some kind of a concrete methods, concrete means to actually bridge the kind of a
Right.
gap that has been
We will-
created in the last 2 years.
We
And
will
I
carry
think
on. We
that-
will carry on this conversation. These are. Let me have brief opening remarks from all my esteemed panelists, and then carry on with the conversation. Actually, Mr. Dhiren Sadokpam has made some very, very interesting and important opening remarks. He said, today should be observed as a day of collective grief, and this is the time to build bridges, not just build bridges with some token statements, but some concrete things on the table, or actually as far as building bridges are concerned. Let me turn to you, Mr. Janghaolun Haokip, the Information and Publicity Secretary of the Kuki INPI, the apex body of the Kuki Cookies. Mr. Haokip, you have heard Mr. Dhiren Sadokpam that today should be observed as a day of collective grief. That means the people of Manipur should recollect, reflect on all those people from both sides who have lost their lives. How would you like to, begin tonight?
All right. Thank you, Wasbi, for having me on your show. First thing I want to make clear is that since we are talking about peace and we are to talk about peace, I want to be very clear with the definition of peace. How do we define peace? So I think for tonight's discussion, and as always, I think peace is not just the absence of violence, but the presence. So if there's no justice, there's no true peace. So that is very important to understand. So we want peace, but peace without a political solution is only a pause before the next crisis. It's only like taking a break. So if we are to talk about peace, justice for all the affected should be there first, should be there in place for any peace or reconciliation to take place. That should be it.
Right. Let me go to Dr. Noni Arambam, Associate Professor of Political Science at DM University. Dr. Noni Arambam, you heard Dhiren Sadokpam, you heard also Mr. Janghaolun Haokip of the Kuki INPI. Now, Mr. Haokip is saying that there should be peace. He said peace is not just the absence of war or absence of violence, but without justice, without political solution, there cannot be peace. My question to you, Dr. Noni Arambam, is that don't you think a congenial atmosphere that a state that is that peace prevails in the state, and peace is important even to hold political discussions. Now, when Mr. Haukip said political solution, obviously he has a certain set of demands which you and I can guess what are these demands. Similarly, who knows, the Metis also will be pursuing some demands, at least some Mete organizations and individuals will be pursuing some demands. My question is, don't you think even to discuss these political solutions or political issues, peace is important first of all?
Thank you, Wasbir, and I really appreciate the theme that you have chosen today to talk about, because you begin by talking about the need for road ahead towards peace. First of all, I think I agree with what Dhiren had said. This is a moment of collective grief, but I would like to add by saying that this is also a moment and a time for mutual self-retrospection, because we have had 2 years of violent experience, and it has not led us anywhere. We have lost civilians. We have seen our youths being armed to teeth. These has actually not led us to anywhere. So now what is important is that there is a need for self-retrospection at the level of communities, because to actually weaponize our relationship in terms of ethnicizing politics in the state, because you rightly said that Manipur is a beautiful state, not only because there are too many people, but it is because it's a very multicultural state. And I think we have to come beyond and work beyond these ideas of exclusive identitarian politics. And we have seen enough of these in the last 2 years.
Yes.
So now I think the road ahead should be about renegotiating and actually moving towards a collective mutuality where people can talk about peace and coexistence. And finally, in this round, I would like to say that community leaders must now be open to talks, be honestly open to dialogue, because if you're not giving a chance to talking to each other or having a dialogue, I think that is really a violation of the normal nuances of rule of law. So what is concerning is that in the state of Manipur, we have seen suspension of everything that is written in the constitution in many, many ways, from fundamental rights to free movement. I think we need to shed light on these issues. These are some fundamental mandates of the state,
right,
and also the civil society. That is what I want to emphasize today.
Right. Really important points again by Dr. Noni Arambam. Let me go to Dr. VL. Dr. VL, I mean, you have been a close observer. You have your own views. My question is, today, Dr. Arambam said coexistence. It's important. Manipur has been a state where different communities coexisted. There were differences even in the past. This is not the first time that Manipur has seen an ethnic clash. There were ethnic clashes in the past. But at the end of the day, these are a set of patriotic people on India's frontier, and there is a history of differences as well as a history of coexistence. How do you look at it? What should be done? How do we move ahead from now?
Yeah, thank you, Wasbir, for inviting me to this panel once again. Today is a day to remember, all the bitterness, but remembering all the bitterness will bring into the solution. So coming into your question, I agree with you. As citizens of India, we have to we coexist one another as a community, as a neighborhood, sharing the same history or sometimes a different history. To make it brief and short, I would agree that as citizens of India, we can coexist within the purview and provisions of the Indian Constitution. I think that is the only possibility now. Now, according to me, and many of the viewers tonight will also agree with me, we talk about peace, and you come up with the ideas of roadmap to establish peace in Manipur. To me, establishing a new neighborhood is the only definition of peace. And that is how we can, live and how we can coexist together each other. Then also within the purview and provision of the Indian Constitution.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Indian constitution, our constitution is extremely flexible. Indian constitution can give solutions which we may not be seeing it right now. But again, if we sit down across the table for dialogue, we can see a lot of discussion. I'll go for a break, but before that, very quickly, Dr. Srima Ningombam, assistant professor at Nambol Sanoy College. Dr. Srima, you are a specialist on women's studies, you teach gender studies. Now, how do you look at the road to peace? The women in Manipur have been playing a lot of role, whether it is peacemaking, whether it is forcefully making a point of view. We have seen it all. The women in Manipur have played big roles in the past, and even during this conflict, we have seen women in Manipur coming out in large numbers, either to vociferously voice their protest on certain issues, or talking or giving a call for peace, both ways.
Thank you for having me here. I just want to say that first of all, we have to fight the militarized masculinity of the state. In any form, the militarization has perpetuated violence. And we know that in a state of conflict and violence, the most vulnerable section of the society are women and children. And we have seen the consequences of the conflict and violence very evidently. And at the same time, it is essential that we regain and retain the lost sisterhood and solidarity of women in our society, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of religion, or regardless of political affiliation. So there is an essential need to revive the lost solidarity over a period of time. It's not going to happen very soon, but there should be an effort to regain that sisterhood and solidarity, and that may be one way of achieving peace in the long run.
How we can regain the lost sisterhood, it's a very, very unique statement. I would consider it as a very unique statement made by Dr. Srima, that the lost sisterhood needs to be regained irrespective of ethnicity. I think in today's disturbed situation, where there has been a breach of trust, where there has been a trust deficit among the two communities, I think women can play a big role. We'll ask her views as well as the views of our other panelists on how we can regain the lost sisterhood to make a beginning. But after this very short commercial break. Welcome back. Let me go to Mr. Dhiren Sadokpam. Dhiren, one thing that we have seen in the last 2 years is that people from the valley are unable to go to the hills, and people from the hills are unable to come to the valley because they are afraid of their lives. Now, this cannot go on forever. This is creating a lot of disruption in the state. Now, the people in the hills have to use the airport in Lengpui, which is 300 to 400 kilometers away in Mizoram, whereas the airport in Imphal is just less than 100 kilometers away. Now, this is the situation, and the 10 elected representatives of the Kuki-Zo community have not been able to attend a single assembly session in the last 2 years. Now, therefore, the most important part for everybody to see a return to normality is the free movement. What do you think about that? Don't you think that is the basic, and for that, who guarantees the safety? Obviously, you cannot go under the cover of army and police and paramilitary, because you will be visiting as a civilian, as a normal citizen of the state. So do you think that stage has come, or if not, why not?
You have rightly said, Wasbir, that people, there's no free movement at all. But before going on to the nitty-gritty or the details of it, I would also want to emphasize one fact which I was supposed to emphasize in the first part, but which I could not. Is like, a day like today, 2 years down the line, if you use the memory of what happened on May 3rd, 2023, and that memory, if you keep on weaponizing, okay, through various political jargons and political talks and political objectives and demands, I think that we will be heading nowhere. So there has to be some form of reconciliation. That is what I meant. But of course, I agree with one of the panelists who says that, there can be no peace without justice. But let justice be there, but that can happen only through some form of dialogue. That is why I think, we should not weaponize memory. The more you weaponize, that's why I said collective grief, because that is just the opposite of what I think is weaponizing memory. Okay. Anyway, but I think in one of the meetings, I think, as we had mentioned in the introduction to the what you call this show, you had mentioned that I think it was on the 5th of April, I think,
Yes.
two prominent CSOs from Manipur, namely Fox and Amuko, through the initiative of the Ministry, the Ministry of Home Affairs, they met with another two groups from, the other side. When I say the other side, is not to uh, go on the process of othering or, creating kind of thing, but I think the two CSOs, particularly Fox and other thing, they have prominently put up this what we had just asked. Okay, the first thing that has to be ensured is, free movement of people and goods, particularly essential commodities. Okay, and this has come right under as one of the panelists says, under the Constitution of India, which Article 19(1)(d). Okay, is under the Constitution of India. There has to be free movement of people and particularly essential goods. I think is very, very important. And when there is free movement of what you call person, the people and goods, I think, and that is one way to start off. I'm not very sure how would both the sides, to be very honest, would deal with this, or how would they negotiate it with the government of India or amongst themselves or among the two communities. That has to be, actually, we have to wait and watch. But
Right.
I think they have suggested this free to ensure free movement of people, that too under the Indian Constitution, under Article 19(1)(d). Okay,
Right.
this has to be brought into picture. I think we have to also note the credibility of government of India, and credibility of the government of India hinges on its ability to safeguard the constitutional rights of all the citizens of Manipur, whether they are from the hills or the valley, who belongs to different faith or different tribes, different ethnicity. I mean, to be very honest, that is the only condition that Constitution of India respects. That is
Right.
why I think, the free movement of
People
people
important.
and goods
Now
is one
let
of
me
the
take
first
this
thing
right.
which is very important.
Right. Let me take this to Mr. Jangolun Haokip of the Kuki NP. Mr. Haokip, the governor, Mr. Ajay Kumar Bhalla, one of the first steps that he took, one of the first visible steps that he took after assuming charge as the governor, after imposition of president's rule, was to try and introduce a free movement of people. It was a symbolic first step where one bus was, provided with security, and from the valley it went to the hills, and there was only one passenger, if you remember. Now, after that, some of the Kuki groups, they said that, okay, free movement is good. We are in favor of free movement of goods and items, but we are not ready yet for the free movement of people. Now, has that position changed? And if there is free movement, as I said, I personally don't think that it is the security forces who can provide protection to an unarmed ordinary civilian. I think it is the people who have to give protection to people from the valley if they have to visit the hills. It is the people in the hills who have to provide the protection, and if it is the hills, it has to the people in the valley who need to provide the protection. Do you agree with this, and how do you look at it?
Free movement, as it is, I was quite confused because free movement without a reconciliation, without reconciling first, a very dangerous step, I said, because for any free movement to happen, there should have been right. So movement, but then it came with security. So how long can the government provide security for the movement of people to and fro? So for any free movement to take between the two people, between the, so that one can go anywhere they like. So once we have reconciliation, free movement will already be there.
Now, my follow-up question to you, Mr. Haukip, is that whose responsibility is it to provide, is to bring about reconciliation? Is it the responsibility of only the government to bring about reconciliation? Do you think that the society has no responsibility at all?
Of course, the society has responsibility, but we cannot substitute the role of the government. So it needs a political will from the government of India to be able to bring about reconciliation in the present conflict that is going on. So if there's no political will from the government, there's no way that reconciliation can take place, because on the other side, the cookies have already made our stance very clear that we have lost everything, our house, our people, we have lost everything. So now the only way that we can secure our future, that the only way we can secure our rights as citizens of the country, is for a separate political administration for our people, so that we can have justice. So we have made it very clear to the government and to the rest of India.
Okay, I'll come to Dr. Noni Arambam for a response to what Mr. Haukip has said, but I'm sorry, I have to go for a very quick break and then come back. Okay, welcome back. Let me go direct to Dr. Noni Arambam. Dr. Noni Arambam, you heard Mr. Jangaulun Haukip saying that, we are talking about the free movement, and he said that that reconciliation has to happen, and reconciliation, and I think he sees that separate administration is the only way out. But point is, even as I said right at the beginning, Dr. Arambam, even to discuss demands, the cookie zoo organizations have their demands, and as I said, I'm sure the Métis organizations, if not everybody, several Métis organizations will have their own demands. My question is, don't you think that the demands and the restoration of peace, road to peace and the demands, do you think that can go parallelly? Can it go parallelly or not?
I think Mr. Haukip has raised a very, very significant point, but I think he is answerable to the point that, he is nobody to actually impose restrictions on the free movement of people. And for advocating restriction of free movement, I think people like him and the organizations which are actually playing havoc on the highways must be facing legal penalties, because right to free movement and the right to life are interconnected. And if you're disallowing people from right to free movement and right to life, you are liable to be punished. These are the freedoms that you need to protect even in the times of emergency. So the people of Manipur, particularly the Valley people, the Métis people, they have not been allowed to travel on these highways for the last 2 years. And it's very surprising that scholars from the Kuki community and, CSOs openly coming out and saying we will not let anyone, travel on these highways. These are absolute violation of the constitution of the country. And I think Indian state must do something on this, because this is too much. The inflation that you talked about, the violation of students to travel around, these are all hampered. But at the same time, I want to also tell the audience that there was a time recently when one honorable MLA who had suffered physical injury even came back to Churachandpur, and he started talking about peace building and reconciliation. But he had to change his position statement the next day. So therefore, there are invisible hands, there are invisible forces who are actually not letting these peace processes happen, and this is a very serious violation of humanitarian protocols around the world.
Right.
And I think Mr. Haukip must also realize, or anybody, Manipur state is a very different state in comparison to other states because of its historical significance and its historical evolution. There were times and there are times, and even today, the valley people, the valley itself is a very small piece of land, but this is hosting 60% of state's land. This is not a Métis specific state. And let us also not divide the CSOs in the format of Métis CSO and others. Community and CSOs are not supposed to be talked about because, there are also significant aspects to understand the Manipur problem because you don't have a CSO. Métis specific demands are not there, I guess. What is the demanding is they're talking about NRC, they're talking about, checking illegal immigration, they're talking about poppy cultivation. All these things are very common issues. This is not specific to any particular community.
Okay, we will expand on that. We'll expand on that, Dr. Noni Arambam. I have to go to Dr. VL and Dr. Shrima, but let me tell you that I am now joined by Mr. Bumswan Naulak, the president of the Zomi Council. Mr. Naulak, welcome. There was some technical problem due to which Mr. Naulak was unable to join me earlier. Mr. Naulak, the question that I'd like to ask you is that, Mr. Haukip and others, we were talking about the need for reconciliation. My question to you, is reconciliation the responsibility of only the government? How can the communities contribute in bringing about reconciliation? Or do you think, it is only the responsibility of the government?
Wasbirji, reconciliation is the responsibility of civil societies and militant groups as much as the government is responsible. So dialogue has to be opened. Dialogue has to take place at various levels. We have to identify certain issues on which we could form a common ground. On that basis, we have to work for reconciliation. First of all, violent conflict has to stop. We cannot just go on like this. So the violence has to stop. No more conflicts should be there. And then we should come over to the dialogue. Dialogue across the CSOs, dialogue across the SU groups, and then the government should take a major role. The government should play a major role in facilitating all this.
Mr. Naulak, you on 5th of April, as the first meeting of the CSOs from both sides took place at the initiative of the MHA. You also attended that meeting in New Delhi. Now, there were only two organizations from the valley and 2 organizations from the hills attended. Now, my question to you, do you think that this discussion should be broad-based? Do you think that more and more civil society organizations from both sides should attend the next meeting, perhaps?
Yes, it should be more broad-based and it should be compatible. Now, if you are bringing some student leaders from some other side and then you are taking the community leadership from other side, that is not compatible. So the dialogue has to take place between compatible groups. That is important.
Okay, now Dr. VL, Mr. Naulak has said that dialogue should take place among compatible groups. Now, okay, that line is down with Dr. VL. I'll come back to Dr. VL. Dr. Shrima, I'm going to you. Now, Mr. Naulak is saying that, dialogue should be among compatible groups. But my question to you, if we look for only compatible groups, the hardliners, unless they also come to some kind of a middle ground, every community will have hardliners. Let's face the fact. It's not surprising. We should not be surprised if we find that there'll be some Métis hardliners and there'll be some Kuki-Zo hardliners. That is the reality. But unless the hardliners also walk the talk, at least to some midpoint, do you think we can make progress?
I believe that first of all we have to understand that the violence that we have been seeing is a manufactured and engineered violence. And initially on the May 3rd itself, the violence was extremely terrible, and in due course of a time it has exacerbated in such a way that even media has played a tremendous role in exacerbating the violence, I believe so. And now the hatred and the mistrust between the two communities is so sharp that obviously the hardliners are, I feel they are majority, but nevertheless, there are people who also believe from both community that peace has to be restored, because we must remember that right before May 3rd, there are several areas in Manipur Valley where the Kuki community and the Meitei community were residing together in an organic and interdependent manner. And that organic and interdependency has been totally shattered after the May 3rd incident. And we have to recall that the violence that we are having is manufactured, and at the same time we have to remember that the rationality of the existence of a state is to protect the life, liberty and freedom and as well as the property of the people, which the state has utterly failed in delivering. Okay. So now, the outcome is that in the last 2 years, the violence has exacerbated, the divide between the communities has exceeded, and I believe at the moment the hardliners would not be possible for them to come and talk. But I believe that women from both communities, if they come up and they can have a dialogue and they can talk and bring certain narratives which are subdued by the media. For instance, the narratives that during the violence, people from different communities, like in the sense that there are instances when Meiteis have saved the Kuki, members of Kuki community during the violence, and in the same manner, some of the Kuki people have also saved Meitei members from Meitei communities.
Absolutely.
Nobody tried to bring up the issue that we have saved each other. We have forgotten those narratives, and in fact, it's not forgotten, but rather those narrative has been put under the rug so that the hatred has been, generated and perpetuated.
Right.
So the very idea that there is an, the idea that the power should always be over somebody, dominating aggression and self-aggrandizement has to keep aside. And the idea that the feminist concept of empowerment, that power to do something, to say something, and to develop something, it has to be put forward. Even it brings a minimal change, it is worth an effort.
Absolutely, very well said, Dr. Srima. Dhiren Sadokpam, I'll come to Mr. Haukip after this. Dhiren Sadokpam, now basically, how do we start? Now, reconciliation. Okay, that April 5th initiative was a very good initiative by the MHA, but only 4 organizations went. And Mr. Naulak has said that, yes, he attended that meeting also. And he said that there is need to broad base this, But do you think broad basing is a good idea? I think that is a good idea from my side, because you have to have as many views as possible sitting together.
Wasbir, why not? It's a good idea. I think Mr. Rolang has rightly pointed out. But I quite disagree again, like you, about the notion of compatible. What is compatibility in making peace, okay? Even if you look at husband and wife compatibility at the level of that matrimonial, I mean, there is nothing called compatibility, I mean, are you talking from the position of strength? Are you talking in terms of how many numbers does one particular group has? Are you talking of in terms of what kind of a leverage does that particular group have, or what kind of a lobby does that particular group has with MHA or with the civilian population? I mean, see, at a certain point, you get lost, lost in translation to certain things. So you start bringing in certain kind of a concepts like compatible groups. I mean, compatible groups, I think for me, it's weird. So for me, I don't buy
let Mr. Naulak, very quickly, before I go to Mr. Haukip, Mr. Naulak, would you like to respond very quickly, because Mr. Dhiren Sadokpam is saying that compatibility is a very confusing concept.
It may be confusing for some of us, but as to us, we are very clear. We are the INPI, the main council of the tribes. So if some person is coming there for initiating dialogue for peace, then there should be person who are not from some assorted youth club or something. It has to be an organization who are holding people with arms, people with doctrine, all this, they should be there in the organization. Then these people are compatible to talk to us. That is the point.
Right. Mr. Hawkip, now you have been insisting that there has to be justice, that the Cookie Joe organizations are demanding a separate administration. But can't we for some time, do you take these two issues parallelly? Demand movement goes on parallelly, and efforts to find peace goes on parallelly. Why can't you? I think this is quite a reasonable idea, isn't it? It's not unreasonable.
All right, before I answer that, I want to go back to one of the panelists who said that I should be legally churched. But legally churched for what? We are not opposing free movement. All we are saying is, for free movement to happen, there should be a reconciliation between the two warring groups. If there's no reconciliation, free movement is not possible. Whoever says that, it is not possible. So if we're talking about legal charges, what about the life that we have lost, the treatment against my people, our people, the cookies on May 3? So those should be the thing that should be legally charged, and that is why we are talking about justice. So if we are to have peace, we need justice. If we are to have free movement, we need reconciliation. I'm not opposed to peace. I'm not opposed to free movement. In fact, we need peace.
Yes,
because most people have already been suffering.
True.
And we need peace.
True.
But for peace to happen, we need justice.
Yeah, but the other side will also be asking for justice, isn't it?
Yes, of course. And we will see to the legality of those issues, the things that we are asking. We're asking for a separate administration because we are not safe under the administration of the state of Manipur. Even the state has participated in orchestrated killings against my people.
But you can change your friends. You can change your friends, but you cannot change your neighbors, Mr. Hawkip.
In fact, we can live with its neighbors, of course, once we have a separate administration. Once we are divided in administrative terms.
Won't you like to see a time where you can stay as friends?
Of course, I would love to do that. But as we're saying it, for anything to happen, we need justice. And I think that justice and the political solution or peace should go hand in hand. They are both intrinsic to one another. There can be no justice without a political solution. There can be no political solution without justice or peace. So that is all I'm saying.
Okay. Dr. Noni Aranbam, recently we have seen the Arambai Tengol, supposed to be the most radical group in the valley. They had come to Guwahati, their top leaders had come to Guwahati. They held a meeting with some Thado organizations at a hotel in Guwahati, and Northeast Live had brought out pictures of that meeting. We don't know what was discussed, but we had visuals of that meeting. Now, point is, don't you think the time has come for dialogue to be broad-based? And it is always important to have the hardliners to at least walk the talk, at least to some point. Unless the hardliners on both sides come, if everybody is a hardliner, then that's a different story. But I don't think that is the case. There are a lot of people are talking a lot of sense from both sides. Now, what are your thoughts on this?
Was there, I think, 80. Arambai Tengol talking to Thado people is a very good sign because if you say that there are segments of groups which are radical, I think as far as the valley is concerned, in the recent weeks or months, there has been a lot of improvement. You can verify it from any source. That's one. And communities' desire to talk to each other is also very, very important in terms of bringing normalcy in the state. But one more important thing that has to be kept in mind is that, the whole idea of, juxtaposing people in terms of minority and majority hasn't worked now. And at the same time, if you say that one community is only the victim and the other is the perpetrator, that's absolutely again wrong. Because if you look at the facticity of the victims of the violence, it is almost the same. So I think it is no point to stress and mobilize people to take sectarian position that one is a victim and the other one is a perpetrator. So that's one. On the other side, if you talk about the sufferings, the farmers, the laborers, the daily wage earners have suffered extensively on both sides. Now, what is important is that in after completion of 2 years, I think we must come to some sense to understand that this is not the way to do politics. And moreover, we must also understand when we talk about radical elements, I think it is very unfortunate that some section of the intellectuals on the hillside is actually not acknowledging the idea that there are elements who want peace. And as a result of which, the division between the two people is apparently, being, manifested as a very deep-rooted division. But on the other side, and as I said in the previous round, that Vungzaging Valte was the man who suffered physical assault. But when he came back to Manipur, Churachandpur, he started saying, "Let's stop and let's have peace." But he had to change his position. The question is that who let him change his position? What is the invisible hand that is forcing people not to talk about peace? These are some fundamental questions that will be important to ask if we really love peace and want to bring normalcy. Moreover, I think one more important thing is that the politics that is harping on generic identities is actually not working. We have seen in the case of many other communities. And therefore, the lesson that we have to learn is that let's leave these very exclusive generic identity politics, because that will only lead people to fight against each other. One last point. If we talk about one last point, this is the last sentence I want to say. If you talk about making the Métis and the Kukis as good neighbors, you have to also understand there are demographic spaces where the Kukis and the Métis are settling together for centuries. For example, if you talk about Churachandpur or More, you can't say that Churachandpur is a Kuki space. You can't say that More is a Kuki space. This transfer of population, which people are hopping on, is very, very unfortunate. This is an absolute violation of right to residence.
Okay. I will now like to bring in Dr. VL. I would like to bring in Dr. VL, but after this very short break. Welcome back. Dr. VL, what is your prescription? I would like to take the concluding remarks from all my esteemed panelists tonight. Dr. VL, what is your prescription? How would you like things to move from this point on?
I was lost because of a technical problem, and thank you for fixing it again. Talk about road to peace in the context of Manipur crisis. There are a few things I would like to highlight. Number one, no one should insist forced peace. I believe both the community welcomed the approach on forced peace. And secondly, the neutral party or the neutral platform should, formulate formal dialogue, engaging the main player, and also I would like to include the invisible hands. See, tonight, like the panelists tonight, or maybe we, up to a certain extent, we may have the, same wishes on peace or bring back justice, but there are invisible hands. So the neutral party and even the power corridor should identify the invisible hands to bring back the normalcy. And
Right.
there should also be a continuation of the interface meeting like that was happened, which was taken place sometime in the first week of April between the two communities. This should be continued, provided that, it should not be a partial representation, but it should be a full representation.
Right. Right. Okay.
And also, see, the apprehension and fear is still very high among
Okay.
the communities.
Okay.
So that needs to be addressed, and they have to be removed. And
Right.
then we need to reestablish
Absolutely.
trust
Absolutely.
between the communities.
Right. Final comments from you, Dhirem Sadokpam. Very briefly,
I think,
very briefly.
as we have been,
Very
I think all of
briefly.
us, all the panelists. Can you hear me?
Very briefly, yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I think as we have said, I think all the panelists agree that peace is a necessity as of now. But how do we go about it? But if you're harping on, say for instance, the other side harping on illegal immigration, poppy cultivation, ethnic balance, what do you call the kind of a demographic survey. I mean, there will be no kind of a thing. There has to be a kind of a point of departure. That is why I think any form of dialogue should be unconditional and it should be inclusive dialogue process. Because if you harp on certain, sloganic objectives, political objectives or political projects, that will have a kind of a very, if you ignore all
Right.
this, you will have a serious repercussion and dialogue
Okay.
will not be possible at all. So, if
So-
for a meaningful
so you are
resolution to
saying-
what is
you are
happening,
saying, Dhiren,
there has to be
Unconditional dialogue should be the need of the hour. Dialogue, but unconditional dialogue. So, Mr. Haukip,
Exactly.
Mr. Haukip, I'm running out of time. Therefore, I'm cutting my panelists short. I'm sorry about that. Mr. Haukip, am I understanding correctly that you have linked the peace efforts to your demand for a separate administration? Have you linked the two? Are you linking
Yes, in
the
fact.
two?
Of course. And just one thing, the people in the valley are saying that Manipur's integrity should not be compromised. But all I want to say is a map cannot matter more than the life of people. If we're talking about Manipur integrity, what about human integrity of the Kukis who have been institutionally biased against us, who have been politically excluded, who have been economically neglected? So the root cause of this conflict is not just violence, it is the political exclusion that has been going on since a long time now. So that is why, for all these reasons, a political solution, a permanent one, is required for anything or any means to move forward.
Okay.
That is the only means to move forward.
Okay. Very, very briefly, Dr. Shrima, what is your final comment? 20 seconds to you.
I believe that it is the responsibility of the state, collective responsibility of the state, media, civil society and the community to restore peace. And at the same time, we must also remember that the resolution and the seeking of the peace should go hand in hand with the resolution of the women's question. We can no longer neglect the women's question, not only women in Meitei society, but women in other community as well, and also women living in different relief camp and their problems has to be understood, and this problem and recognition of this problem should go hand in hand.
Right.
Seeking peace, nationalist question, and other road to peace. So I think that's my observation.
Okay. Mr. Naulak, your final comments, very, very briefly, please.
I am in favor of open dialogue, preferably in home turf.
Do you think it is possible? Do you think it is possible in home turf?
Yes, we will ensure that we will make it possible.
That is very optimistic, extremely optimistic.
Yeah.
I quite like
Yes.
Mr. Naulak's optimism. Final comment from you, Dr. Noni Aranbam. Very, very optimistic comment from Mr. Naulak that you should have dialogue, open dialogue in home turf, and he said that they will make it possible. Very brief comment from you, Dr. Noni.
I'm quite happy with the view that has been put forward by Mr. Nolak, and his optimism is appreciated. That's what I would like to say. The second point is that we should not equate the government with one particular ethnic group, and that will be completely a denial of the complex social profile of the state.
Right.
And finally, the poor performance of the state during the time of the elected government and also during the time of PR is something very unconvincing. And state should ensure the rule of law is sustained in the state of Manipur.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, I thank all my panelists for participating in this very engaging discussion. And at the end of the day, I think we want peace. The state wants peace. The people want peace. But there are various opinions of the panelists on how peace should be achieved. I thank all of them once again. I thank the viewers for watching the program. Good night and goodbye.
Thank you.